The editing kind of really sucked in the first one, so let's try and do a little bit better for this one. Fingers crossed. Welcome back to episode 2 of What's Happening in Theros. This episode is titled The Red Rabbit Railroad. Now, in the first episode, which you should go and watch if you haven't already, is an introduction to the players in the party. Just to remind you, we have Neoptomalus, the Satyr Shadow Sorcerer. We have Mello, the Ranger Centaur. We have Lily, the Satyr... What the heck was she? She was a bard. And then we have Leon, the Leonin Paladin. Yep, very confusing, I know. We begin the campaign on the road to Akros. And there's a couple of reasons that I wanted to start the campaign on the way to Akros. The first reason, Akros is a rather human supremacist city, meaning they don't really like other races. The only one that they will really tolerate are the centaurs. Nope, the satyrs. And the reason they tolerate the satyrs is because they're typically a fun-loving race, and who doesn't like a little bit of fun? When it comes to centaurs, they just view those as aggressive raiders. Their territory borders Furies, where the Furies raider centaurs tend to live. They also share borders with the Minotaur and the Leonin, who they from time to time have skirmishes with. Mostly the Minotaurs. Leonin, they can be on friendly terms every now and then. I do recall reading in the book somewhere that they will do like a military exchange every now and then with the Leonin so that they can learn with each other. But if you think Sparta, this is essentially Sparta, a very proud warrior race. Most of the people in Akros will worship Iroas, the god of victory. And every year in Akros, they hold an event dedicated to Iroas, the Iroan Games, where people from all over, well, primarily Akros, but from all over Theros are welcome to come and compete in a variety of games, such as the gladiatorial combat, the chariot racing, wrestling, archery, and so on and so forth. It's essentially the Olympics. I was inspired to start the campaign here because one of my players, Leon, the Leonin, took the athlete background and decided, well, there are a few options given to you in the book. You don't have to take these options, but they're there for your preferred games. And she chose gladiatorial combat. And as soon as she chose that, I was instantly inspired and wanted to run some gladiatorial games, which you'll see in a few episodes from now. The other reason was because Theros is so full of lore. I wanted to have my players experience that lore firsthand. None of them are from Akros. They have never been to Akros. And I wanted them to explore it as they got there, rather than having to bombard them with loads of information prior to the start of the game about the place they're from and so on and so forth. So if I start them on the road and they're on the way to this city and they get to this city, they can experience it as they go, rather than a place that they should, in canon, already know about. If I started it in the Skola Vale, for example, where 2 of them are from, then theoretically they should know a lot about that place already, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted the whole thing to feel new and fresh to the players and give them that sense of adventure right off the bat. Like I said, we begin the campaign on the road to Akros, which is where we will introduce the first encounter, the Red Rabbit. So as the players are walking down the road, a red rabbit suddenly, out of nowhere, springs up on them and asks for help. This is a moral quandary for the players, because not only is there a crimson red rabbit in the middle of the road, but this crimson red rabbit is talking, which, despite being a very high fantasy setting, this is not normal. So, after speaking to the rabbit for a minute or so, the rabbit explains that he is being hunted by hoplites from Certessa. They've been hunting him for days, and he is scared, he is hungry, he is tired, and he just wants to go home. But this rabbit is speaking, and the players are confused, and it's bright red. So they roll a couple of insight checks amongst them, and they determine that there's something else that's fishy about this talking red rabbit. But despite that, they decide to hide the rabbit, and after a few minutes, the rather tired, exhausted, pissed off Certessan hoplites finally arrive and question the players as to whether or not they've seen this fluorescent, crimson, red talking rabbit. To which the players say no, and then go on to roll a successful persuasion check. So without further ado, the hoplites are on their way, and the players have successfully hidden the rabbit. They continue talking to the rabbit just to find out who he is, why he's talking, why he's red, and what the heck is going on. And through the discussions, they learn from the rabbit that the rabbit was originally a human who was punished by Nylea, goddess of the hunt, for hunting beasts without her permission, which is a huge no-no for any follower of Nylea. Unfortunately for the rabbit, there are 2 followers of Nylea in the party, and without thinking, the ranger, Mello, instantly puts an arrow right through the rabbit, killing it. It was at this point I awarded the players their first piety point for killing the rabbit and pleasing Nylea, goddess of the hunt. Not only that, but Neoptomalus Neo was also awarded a piety point for keeping a secret and pleasing his deity, Crufix, god of horizons. And that's the story of the first encounter, the Red Rabbit. Now, the reason I wanted to do this encounter first was to immediately establish off the bat that the actions that they take in service to their deities will give them rewards. And this is D&D. This is all about rewards. Who doesn't like a reward? So that's encounter 1. That's where I started off. Now let's have a look at encounter 2. Later on that evening, the players decided to bed down for the evening, and they found a nice little abandoned temple just off to the side of the road, which provided ample shelter. During the night, they sat around and they sold songs and told stories and so on and so forth, when a stranger mysteriously walked out of the bushes. This stranger was dressed in the garb of a Acroan hoplite and introduced himself as such before asking the players if he could sit down by the fire and spend the evening with them and share in their stories and tales, and, if they'd be so kind, their food and their warmth. The players rolled an insight check and determined that, okay, this guy is above board, we will let him stay. After an evening of revelry, they begin to settle down for the night, and the hoplite, who hasn't told anybody his name, asks the players why they're travelling to Akros, to which Leon explains he is heading towards Akros in order to participate in the Acroan Games. So with this encounter, what I wanted to do was kind of set the expectations for what's going to happen once they get to Akros. So the hoplite explains that Acroans really don't like non-humans, and it's going to be very, very unlikely that they are going to let non-humans compete in the games without a viable sponsor. He goes on to explain that that the players can get sponsorship in a number of ways. They can have somebody from nobility sponsor them, which would be incredibly difficult. They could get sponsorship from a member of the military, a high-ranking member, or they could get sponsorship from one of the previous members of the games. He then goes on to tell them that there is a non-human winner of the gladiatorial from a few decades ago, a man called Jevons. He tells the players to go and seek out Jevons and get sponsorship from him. Figuring that would be the easiest course to take, the players happily decide to follow that course of action. But just before they bed down for the night, the hoplite decides to leave. Now, I think it's rather obvious that this hoplite is Acroan and therefore human, but as he is walking back through the bushes and down towards the stone road, the sound of flip-flops against stone kind of dissipates and begins to turn into the sound of horse hooves on stone, clippity-clop. Unbeknownst to the players, that was an encounter with Iroas, god of victory, who was there to send Leon on his way. Now, one of the players did decide to roll a religion check, and they rolled really high, which allowed me to tell him that that was very likely to be the god Iroas. So what I did with that encounter was establish the fact that gods are tangible. They are not just concepts like they usually are in D&D. They are people you can speak to. They are people that will come down and help you, and that you can encounter along the way. This will happen a couple more times in the next few sessions, and throughout the entire campaign, but that has been established. gods are here, and they're going to do stuff, and they're going to guide you. And also, with the previous encounter, if you do things for them, you will be rewarded. Now, so far, we've had 2 encounters, neither of which have ended up in combat, but what's D&D without combat? Now, this 3rd encounter, I wanted to put this in there as a little bit of foreshadowing, as well as a fun bit of combat just to end the session, because even though I find the combat the least favourite part of D&D, I'm more of a story guy, I don't think you can have a session without any combat. There needs to be stakes. So the next day, they wake up from camp and continue the final half-a-day walk towards Akros. As they get a couple of miles near to the city gates, they come to a crossroads in the path. And standing right there in the center of the crossroads is a bronze statue, which is kind of strange. They investigate it for a little while, and as they do so, the bronze statue begins crumbling down into pieces, revealing that it is filled with poisonous snakes on the inside who instantly attack. Now, for any player, this could just be a statue filled with snakes, but we have an oracle in the party, Lilith. She is the oracle, and she should be seeing an omen in this. I'm not sure if she did at the time, but it was definitely an omen. It was heralding the arrival of the big, bad, evil guy, Hythonia. This was merely foreshadowing, and players aren't going to learn about Hythonia for a few sessions now. But I wanted to have this attack by snakes really be something that sets the tone for what's going to come forward. There will be a lot more snakes that they're going to have to fight in the future. A lot more, and that's something that we'll get to in future episodes. But after one of the players almost died, yes, I did almost kill one of the players in the first session, they managed to defeat the poisonous snakes, and then make it the rest of the way to Akros, where they have finally arrived. Now that they're here, they can search out Jevons and find that sponsorship, and that is how I did the first session. I hope that all made sense. I hope that was very clear for you and very interesting. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the city encounters that I ran once we got to Akros and the resources that I used for those. We're going to talk about meeting Jevons and the inspiration that I got for the first chapter of the campaign. I hope this was interesting, and I will speak to you in the next one. Peace. Oh, wait, and before I go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, please.